listening to the Subrogation Support Network, a podcast from Mattison, Wickert & Layer, America's subrogation law firm, with dissemination of new developments and changes in subrogation law, as well as emerging trends and best practices. Here's your host, Ashton Kirsch.
Hello, everybody. This is Ashton Kirsch, your host for today's episode of the Subrogation Support Network podcast. It is my privilege to be joined by just an excellent lawyer, a military veteran, and just a good all-around guy, Jerrod Fussnecker. Today, we're actually going to have another interesting one where we're going to have two podcast hosts talking at you and with you rather than just one. Jerrod has an excellent podcast. You need to listen in. He'll tell you a bit about it. It's the Military Veterans in Law. Today, we're going to do a brief introduction of both of us. For Jerrod's audience, I want him to know about us and our podcast. For my audience, for you all, I want you guys to know about Jerrod and what he is talking about. To jump into it, my name's Ashton Kirsch. For those on the Military Veterans in Law audience listening, I'm a subrogation lawyer, a shareholder with Mattison, Wickert & Layer, also known as MWL. We're a nationwide subrogation and litigation law firm litigating subrogation and insurance recovery matters, all 50 states. Created this podcast a couple of years ago. Actually, it started with a LinkedIn group, which is similar to Jerrod's story he's going to tell you. Subrogation Support Network started just answering client and prospective client questions. Next thing you know, we had about 1,000 people in this niche subrogation support group, and it grew from there. I said one day, we do all these webinars, why not just do a podcast? Get before the audience. You guys know me. I like talking. I like talking to myself, at you. I'm a lawyer. I just like all around talking about things. So that's really where it got started. Now, it's enough about me. Jerrod, why don't you tell me a bit about yourself, your background, and before that, a bit about your podcast. Tell the audience about what you guys are doing.
Hey, thanks a ton for having me on the show, Ashton. Very excited to be participating in this. And yeah, so I run the Military Veterans in Law podcast, similar to the Subrogation Support Network. We have a LinkedIn group, and it kind of stems from my own background. I was originally in the Army. I eventually was a prosecutor and then a federal employee, and I made the transition to private practice. And the idea behind the Military Veterans in Law podcast is that as military veterans, we have this huge kind of alumni network out there, and that the service, it takes people away from the homes where they grew up, their hometowns, maybe their colleges and law schools, some their alumni networks, and they may end up in a part of the country that they're not from, and they're away from, their traditional networks. But as a veteran, no matter where you go, there's a built-in alumni network there that folks just need to be able to plug into. And so we've been very fortunate since we launched this in June. We're over 850 members in our LinkedIn group, and we continue to grow quickly. We got representation throughout the country. And so the idea is for this to be this one-stop shop where folks that are looking to, whether it's they're looking to hire a veteran or they're a veteran looking to go in-house or to a firm or, to an insurance company, wherever it is that they're looking in the legal world, that we're a group there that they can come to and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in doing. And that there's going to be somebody in the network that can reach out to them and say, hey, we got your back. We want you to come on board. Now, you kind of asked about my background. And so I grew up outside of Cincinnati on a farm, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Great place to be from, Ripley, Ohio, and Brown County. I went to West Point undergrad. And coming out of West Point, I got stationed at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, worked in basic training here, and I did 2 years here, and I got accepted to a program, the Army-funded legal education program, where the Army sent me back to law school. So I went back home to the University of Cincinnati for law school and didn't think that I was going to end up back in South Carolina. However, I had met a girl right before I left, and we ended up dating, and we got married at the end of law school, spent 3 years stationed in Germany. And then I deployed to Afghanistan. On the backside of Afghanistan, I got stationed in Georgia and then California and then North Carolina. And then my wife said, you know what? It's time to get back to South Carolina. I've done a lot of moving and I'm ready to get back home to South Carolina and start a family there. So that's kind of like the big picture overview of how I ended up here at Columbia, South Carolina.
Hey, Fantastic. And also the weather probably has something to do with it. It's pretty beautiful down there. Come here in Wisconsin in the winter.
Yeah, life's good here. It's 75 today. And, next week we're packing up. We got twin 6-year-old boys, Frank and Mike, and we're packing them up in the car and we're heading to Cincinnati. I don't think Cincinnati has 75 in store for us.
That is fair. Well, first off, thank you so much for your service. It's an amazing background and your story is just fantastic, which is why, I encourage everyone to listen to this podcast. It's really, really good. Tell me a bit about for the podcast. What are some of the episodes, just so the audience can have a better idea of, what are you talking about? What's kind of the general gist of it?
Yeah. So it's folks that have served in the military in any capacity. We've had folks that have been attorneys, folks that have been infantry officers, you name it in the military. And there's folks that have these different types of background. We got individuals who've been special forces officers, and now they are in the practice of law. And so a typical episode, we talk about what folks did in the military, any deployments they did, Iraq, Afghanistan, that type of thing, and then how they became interested in the law and their transition to private practice and where they are now. Because a lot of times folks that are transitioning out of the military, they don't know exactly how a future employer is going to read their resume, and they need help transitioning what they've done in the military to what it is that they want to do in the civilian world. For instance, you're always talking about, and I love listening to your podcast because it's really such a great resource in learning the practice of subrogation. And you're talking about identification, investigation, negotiation, the 3 Ations all the time. And there's plenty of people who've been in the military who have developed those skills, and they just need to be able to take that skill set and apply it to a new substantive area.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's the hard part is, how do we train the industry? How do we make sure? And this is so important because, we need to support our veterans. We need to realize these skill sets are incredibly impactful. Some of my best employees came to us and they didn't have, 10 years of experience handling subrogation cases, generally speaking, but they have JAG background, or they had a background actually doing exactly what we need them or want them to do. But it didn't necessarily appear the same way as it would be on paper if they worked for ABC Insurance Company. I know. So you're talking about those issues, trying to help figure out how to kind of present that and make sure also that the industry understands, right? That the employers, that the hiring people understand that these skill sets do translate. And there's huge skill sets that you're developing, maybe when you're not truly just, the title isn't subrogation though, right?
That's right. And, I think a lot of times folks are hiring for a certain position, and ideally they want to hire somebody who's done that exact same thing before. And you're not going to get that exactly from a military veteran most of the time. I think it may have been on the joint episode you did with Chris Tidball from the Claims Hunters podcast. I think you all may have mentioned, hiring for talent and attitude. And, obviously, if you've got talent, attitude, and all the exact requisite experience, well, that's great. But a lot of times, veterans, they've got the talent, they've got the attitude. That they want to work hard because they volunteered to go to the military. But there's also some folks out there who do have specialized experience in claims that, folks wouldn't necessarily assume that they have. When my first JAG Corps assignment in Germany, I was assigned to be a claims judge advocate. That was my first job as an attorney. I had 2 claims examiners, German claims examiners that I worked with, Karen and Martina. And, let's say that some type of accident happened off post where a soldier was involved in a car wreck with a German. The German individual, they could put in a claim against the Army, and our claims examiners would help investigate, right? The identification was easy because they're coming forward with the claim in this aspect. They would help investigate, and then we would go and get quotes from like local German car shops and stuff like that to help negotiate what is a fair resolution. And so every installation, military installation throughout the world has a claims judge advocate. And when, I remember that was my first job out of law school, and I wasn't thinking, in the future, this is what I'm going to be doing, like I had done the mock trial team. I knew I was going to be a prosecutor. I knew I was going to be a litigator. And it's just in retrospect that I realized, the skills that I was applying as a claims judge advocate, what I'm doing today, it's directly on point.
I was talking, we had a claim against, I think it was a Navy claim, and we're pursuing the case. And I made, it's pretty close with the JAG official who was assisting us on the other end in resolving this case. I don't remember the exact facts, but I did start asking questions, and I was kind of amazed to hear how many lawyers there are in the military and how many people have that background. It wasn't something that you kind of really think about or conceptualize, but there are a lot of people out there, a lot of talent that are dedicating their lives and their time to protecting our country, and then are coming back and have these skill sets that absolutely translate.
That's right. On active duty in the Army alone right now, there's close to 2,000 judge advocates, and then probably close to that amount, if not more, in the Army Reserves and National Guard. I continue to serve in the Army Reserve now. I'm a military judge, and so I help out with, I preside over courts martial and search warrants still. And so it's a way to continue to serve that I really enjoy. But there's lots of folks out there still in the Reserve and Guard that we get this great training through the military. Like when you graduate law school, you go to the U.S. Army JAG School, which is on the campus of University of Virginia in Charlottesville, right next to UVA's law school. They put you through 4 months of training there before you go out to your first assignment. And then every assignment you're in, you either go back to the JAG school to learn more about that substantive area, or they send trainers to where you are. So there's really a focus on great training in the Army that, parlays itself well into private practice.
I mean, and the soft skills. I mean, I can tell you, we have an office in California. We'll interview a lot of people. And pretty often it's, I couldn't make the interview because the waves were too good. And surfing was, the surfs were up or whatever it could be. It's like, really? And then, it's really tough, especially with younger employees, to find people who have a sense of responsibility, to find people that have a sense of structure. And I feel like, and I could be totally wrong. I mean, you tell me if I'm not, but I think that's something that it's a skill set that is invaluable. Well, you don't put it on paper, but you get when you are hiring experienced military veterans.
I mean, it's ingrained into you from day one, whether you're going to basic training or to a commissioning source. Like my first day at West Point, I had to go through cadet basic training for 2 months there. And you are a plebe, and you report to a sophomore team leader who reports to a junior squad leader who reports to a senior platoon leader. And throughout your 4 years there, you are held accountable for all things that you do or don't do. And it's drilled into your head in the military that you have to be at the right place, right time, right uniform, and you have to be a consistent performer day in and day out. And it's things like that that I often take for granted. Like the Army has sent me through, leadership course after leadership course, officer basic course, judge advocate officer advanced course, command and general staff college, Army War College, that folks in the civilian sector, they don't necessarily get all that leadership and management training that we take for granted. So that I think it really helps, like when you come into a new organization, there's a learning curve there, no doubt, where you have to learn the substantive matter. But, learning organizations and how they work and how to try to leverage the most out of them, that's something that is just baked into our DNA in the military.
Absolutely. So now more about you, Jerrod, is so obviously for the background of everybody, we're starting to work together. Jerrod's helping us at MWL on some claims in South Carolina on a go-forward basis. Very excited about that. You would tell me a bit about how you went from your military career to decide, insurance litigation, subrogation, that's what I'm going to do. Where did that come into play? What happened with your life, your transition from military to civilian life?
Yeah, I loved being an Army judge advocate. I was stationed in Germany, deployed to Afghanistan, and then I had subsequent assignments to Georgia, California, and then North Carolina. And then my wife said, you know what, it's time to get back to South Carolina. I want to be near my family when we start our family. And so I just knew that I wanted to be in the courtroom. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go be a prosecutor because I know I'll be in the courtroom. I'm fortunate that the South Carolina Attorney General's office, the Attorney General is a colonel in the National Guard. He's a JAG, very supportive military presence there. So I went and I prosecuted at the Attorney General's office for 6 years. And what's really paid off with that experience, I got to do a lot of trials there, but then I also got to really know South Carolina. We've got 46 counties here. I think through the Attorney General's office, I appeared in court in about 35 of the counties. And I love doing that. I love prosecuting. And then but there was part of me that always wanted to learn civil litigation and practice it. And I had an opportunity at Fort Jackson to take an employment litigation job there. I did that. And then earlier this year, like all the other federal employees, I received the Elon Musk Doge email saying, hey, we're considering reducing the, number of federal employees. And would you be interested in taking the deferred resignation program? So I looked around, and Collins and Lacey, the firm that I'm at, they had a listing, and I had always been concerned about being able to balance my reserve responsibilities with private practice. But our firm was founded by Joel Collins, a Vietnam veteran who was a JAG in Vietnam, and then he taught at West Point, came back to South Carolina where he was assistant U.S. attorney before starting this firm. And the managing partner, Christian Stegmeyer, who's in the State Guard here, he said, our firm is going to support your reserve career more than any other firm would ever do. And I was like, that gave me the confidence, like, it's time to make the change. And so here at Collins and Lacey, we do insurance defense litigation in construction, hospitality and retail management, premises liability, and trucking cases. And so it's been a great transition. And, all these skill sets that I've kind of accumulated over the years mesh very well here. It wasn't by plan, but it was the culture here that really attracted me.
You mentioned something interesting there, and it's finding a firm that could allow you to balance your reserve responsibilities and the other obligations you have. Obviously, as an employer, myself, we want to make sure that that is something that we encourage, something that we support. Do you see that as a hill, like as a difficult thing to explain to employers, or do most employers kind of understand that that's something that's out there, that you're going to want to continue to support your country, continue to be in the reserves? Or is that something where they look on and say, oh, wow, you're going to be off more time than the other person? I'm interested to hear how that kind of relates and what we can do.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the individual employer, right? I think here it helps that we've got veterans that are part of the leadership here, and so they understand the package of what they're getting. It may be a little bit easier just to hire somebody who's a veteran who's no longer in the Reserve or National Guard because they've done their service and they can focus fully on, the doing the firm's work. When you're hiring a reservist or a National Guard, there's a chance that they could get mobilized. I mean, we're seeing a lot of mobilizations right now. We have folks that are being mobilized to be immigration judges, to be special assistant U.S. attorneys to prosecute for Department of Justice. They're moving folks from the Army, the different service JAG corps to support Department of Justice. And even outside of the mobilizations, most people, you hear about the weekend drill once a month and then 2 weeks of annual training a year. And frankly, a lot of times it ends up being more than that. So it helps just understanding that, you're getting the benefit of this person's military training, but some of them are going to continue to serve. And, it's nice when you have a depth of talent at a place. So here, it's like anything else. When I've got reserve training coming up, I know about it typically months in advance. I put it on the calendar and we schedule around it. And, when somebody's on vacation, I'm always ready to help them out. And then, fortunately, we've got a great team here that also helps me out when I have to go do reserve duty.
Fantastic. Now, one question I wanted to ask you is, more about just insurance carriers in general. And obviously, most of our clients, most of our audience are subrogation people or insurance people, be it subrogation managers, subrogation adjusters, insurance claim heads, whoever it could be, but those in that space. Question for you is, why is it so important? Why should insurance companies have a strategic and specific focus on hiring and retaining those with military backgrounds and the associated talents?
So these folks, at an insurance company, it's part of an organization that they've got a mission, and the people that they're hiring can come in and plug and play in these types of organizations very quickly. They're going to be motivated to learn the substantive material, but then also to be a team player. And I know that right now that in the insurance industry, amongst adjusters and so forth, that there's a lot of turnover. We're starting to see, baby boomer generation retiring. And we've got an era of global war and terrorism veterans that are ready to step in and take on that mantle. And there's a steep learning curve initially, but you have people that are motivated that want to, take that on and, be the next generation of leadership.
Absolutely. I think that there's also a level of, there's the team player mentality, right? You're taught to act as a team. There's a level of personal responsibility. There's even a level of, I've seen employer-employee loyalty as well, and an interest in growing with the firm. I mean, any other interesting things that you found when it comes to being a veteran or working with veterans trying to come into these positions that they should be telling their employers as they're prospectively hiring, or employers should listen to that are some keywords or different things that are important?
Well, it's this idea of accountability. Like when I was a JAG prosecutor, the brigade commanders and the generals that I answered to, they were the ones that actually made the decisions as to whether a case was going to go to court martial or if there was going to be an administrative separation. There's been some tweaks to that statutorily that are kind of like outside the context of the show. But I was responsible. Each case, I was reporting to them. I had a tracker of what is going on in this case. And there was no letting cases fall through the cracks. So I try to bring that same mentality in being responsive to my clients and to my adjusters. I've got my tracker, and I know that on any single case, I'm going to go to it and say, hey, this is what's going on in this case. This is the next step forward. And just constant, not as much communication as the adjuster wants and needs, because they need information to manage their cases, is the same thing. You know, my brigade commanders, they wanted from me, they wanted information so that they could make an informed decision. And, you know, facts, it doesn't get better with time. They want to, if it's a bad outcome, they want to know sooner rather than later. And so just bringing that same mentality to whatever job you're in of I'm going to push every day to try to get the best resolution that I can.
And is a law firm, what can the law firms be doing to attract and retain this talent internally?
Yeah. So obviously the Military Veterans in Law LinkedIn group is a great place to go because there's 850 attorneys that are there already. And so I encourage people to go to that LinkedIn group and post their job postings. There's also veterans hiring conferences throughout the country that, several large law firms, we got some AmLaw 100 firms that put on hiring conferences for veterans. So being plugged into that and attending those. And so, when in doubt, reach out to me and I'll be happy to plug you into some folks. Like if you're wanting to hire a veteran, just let me know what area of the country you're in and we can definitely find you some people.
Now, back to your audience here. What advice do you have for those in maybe your audience or even my audience who may happen to be veterans in a similar space, right? Coming and looking for a new career after their, time in the military. What advice do you have for them on entering the insurance space? Any guidance? And you've done this before, right? What did you do that kind of made you successful in that transition?
Well, I wanted to get in the courtroom. And once I got back here to Columbia, where my wife is from, I just did the things that excited me. And I didn't think of it as networking, but it was just stuff that I was interested in. I joined the State Bar's Military and Veterans Law Committee, and I've served on it for the past 7 years. I had a friend who was the director of the Veterans Legal Clinic at the University of South Carolina School of Law, which is just down the street here. And I volunteered to be an adjunct with them. And I just started meeting people. And it was through that, our managing partner here, Christian Stegmeyer, he is on the Military and Veterans Law Committee with me. So when it came time for me to make the move to private practice, I called Christian and he's like, we got you. I did not have a long job search because, it was somebody that I had just worked with on a volunteer basis. So it really helped out. And, it wasn't by planning or anything like that. It was just by following my interest. But I would say for the folks that, that you've been in the military and you're looking to make the transition, I've had a guest on the Military Veterans Law podcast who went and became counsel for an insurance company in-house straight out of the JAG Corps. And I think that is a great transition because you got folks in the military with a lot of courtroom experience. And so they're happy to go to these insurance firms and get in the courtroom straight away. And so I think going in-house for insurance companies, going to firms, or, going and being prosecutors or public defenders, all great routes to folks. And, your first job isn't your last job, right? But they all help you build skills that are going to help you, figure out where you want to go next. Like a few years ago, I was absolutely just focused on being a prosecutor. I had a bunch of murder trials, and that's where it was my whole life. I knew that at some point in time, I was likely to go civil litigation, but I wasn't focused on subrogation. And now that's where I'm immersed. Like that's where my mind is. I'm doing insurance defense litigation and subrogation, and I've just thrown myself into it, and that's where I want to be.
And for those, I guess one thing to mention is for those in your audience who don't know what the heck subrogation is, I'll be honest with you, there's people who work in subrogation who don't know what subrogation is. But the kind of in a nutshell, and I don't have this prepared, but kind of my in a nutshell explanation is, pretty much we're plaintiff's attorneys for insurance carriers. We are handled the plaintiff side, right? So we're pursuing cases on behalf of insurance companies against typically other insurance company. So it could be, as simple as an auto collision where, we represent ABC insurance company whose vehicle's in a collision with XYZ insurance company. And XYZ's insured the driver ran a red light and hit the ABC vehicle. Well, ABC's paid out $20,000 for the repair of that vehicle. And now we are pursuing XYZ for that $20,000. It can be that simple to as complex as, right now I'm actively involved in, several dozen cases, multi-million dollars against Tesla for autonomous vehicle failures. Wildfires in California, we're handling, hundreds of millions of dollars of those claims at our firm. So, it's a lot of that stuff. So from every level of complexity, but just so for the audience know, because I feel like even in my audience, people might be hearing this word subrogation, they're just Googling it, and you Google it and you're like, what the heck does that mean? But I think that's important to kind of have a general grasp of what subrogation is, because those in the industry, I'll tell you guys, if you are, if you're not in subrogation or if you're looking for a good field and you're a veteran moving into it, man, it's a great space because we get the hustle of plaintiff's work. So you get to be a plaintiff's lawyer, right? I get to work on a lot of contingency fee cases. I get to deal with kind of the creativity of building narratives, telling stories, taking a case that maybe isn't a slam dunk, putting lipstick on a pig and making it a slam dunk, and finding ways to get creative and then bringing in money. Rather than limiting paying out money, we're the carrier's best friend. We're helping bring in the dollars, which thereby reduces the premiums, which thereby helps the industry as a whole. So I just figured, I didn't want to leave this presentation, this podcast, this show without at least telling people what subro means.
That's a great point, Ashton. And also, the thing about a lot of veterans, transitioning, when they get into the workspace, a lot of times you'll hear them say that they miss the camaraderie of being in the military and they miss the mission, right? And I really enjoyed the podcast that you did with Gary Wickert about the societal benefits of subrogation and how it passes on to small businesses whose insurance premiums, right, they're related to what insurance companies have to pay out for those small businesses. So by doing subrogation, you're recouping money for these small businesses, their insurers, and helping keep their premiums lower so that these small businesses can thrive. I grew up on a farm. My dad's a cattle farmer, grain farmer. And so, small business, I care about those guys, right? And they need to be able to continue to thrive. And so I really enjoyed, hearing your interview of Gary and him putting this in kind of like a larger context of, okay, what is it that can motivate you to want to do this work? How are we helping society in doing it?
Right. And it's hard to really think of that mindset. It's like, how am I helping the world as an insurance lawyer? But there's definitely some perspectives on it, right? And it's not always just out there denying claims for injured people, right? Sometimes we're out there actually bringing money back for the carrier. And, I don't feel so bad taking money from insurance carrier XYZ, bringing it to ABC. It's kind of in a way making the insurance world right. But that's one thing just to keep in the back of your mind. If you're interested in we talk about a lot of legal issues on our podcast that are applicable not just to subrogation or insurance lawyers. We talk about insurance subrogation. We deal with a lot of product liability litigation. So a lot of my podcasts will talk about products claims. We'll talk about fire claims, water losses, all the above. So I just think it's important that we keep learning, which is why my goal on my podcast is every once in a while bringing in people like you so that my audience and your audience can kind of keep expanding our knowledge, right? Knowledge is power, and that's how we get better at what we do.
Well, and it's a great area to be for teamwork also, because both within here at my office, it's fun working with the other attorneys to strategize how we're going to go about something, putting our investigator to work to go and track down information for us, working with our paralegal and legal assistants to balance all these different cases that we got going on. And then also outside of the firm, strategizing with the adjuster and the client on the way forward, figuring out which experts we're going to hire to build the best case that we can. And every person really has to carry their weight for us to get the best result that we can.
100%. Now, I do have a few more questions I wanted to ask you because I think it would be great for the audience. Now, when you transitioned from your military career, and obviously you're still in it, right? Obviously with the reserve. But what was the most difficult thing about transitioning from military to civilian life? Not insofar as anything personal, but more so when it comes to career and going to an actual law firm environment rather than being in potentially a more structured environment otherwise.
Yeah. So as an Army JAG attorney, you come in as a captain and you're going to be a captain for about 7 years. And every about 2 years, you get a new job. So I was a claims attorney at first, and then I was a prosecutor in Germany for 2 years. Then I deployed to Afghanistan, where I advised the commanding general on an array of issues, targeting the enemy, right? Rule of law operations. I helped train Afghan prosecutors and defense attorneys while we were there. And then from there, I went to Georgia, and I was a military magistrate at Hunter Army Airfield for a year and supervised the legal office there. And then from there, I was a supervisory prosecutor at Fort Irwin, California. So every couple of years, you're getting a new job. And the idea is that as you go up in rank, then you advise higher level commanders. And they also have you rotating between different substantive areas, whether it's military justice, national security law, contract law, so that as you go up in rank, you can supervise a JAG office of the lower ranking folks that are specializing in each of these areas. So for me, when Rebecca's like, it's time to get back to South Carolina, I was like, oh, I have to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up now, right? It's like in the military, you just wait every 2 years. Where are they going to tell you to go, and what job are they going to have you do next? But I knew the thing that excited me was being in the courtroom. And so I just went with that. As like, I don't know that I'm going to be a prosecutor forever, but that is what excites me. And so that's the direction that I went. And that being at South Carolina Attorney General's office was just such a great transition for me. Because now here in private practice, like we're representing cases throughout the state. And I'm like, oh, didn't expect all that prosecution work to pay off so well. But, a lot of the experts that we deal with, it's like, okay, I've dealt with plenty of experts as a prosecutor, just dealing with them in a different context now. So, the skill set transitioned really well.
Absolutely. No. Are there any industry groups that are there to, just like your group, that are there to help veterans as they try to transition into these industries? Other podcasts, other things that we should be pointing our audiences to if they are in that position, looking to come into the insurance space?
Yeah, so there's Life After the JAG Corps is a podcast hosted by Tom Welsh. He's a retired Navy officer, and I went on his show earlier this year, and he, was really the motivation for the podcast that I'm doing, because his focus is on folks that were in the JAG Corps. But, like here in South Carolina, when I go to our State Bar's Military Veterans section meeting every quarter, the people around me, some of them were the JAGs, but a lot of them, we got a guy who was an Air Force Office of Special Investigations, another guy who was an infantry officer. They're coming from all these different backgrounds. And so that was the impetus for the Military Veterans in Law LinkedIn group and podcast is like, we have, I believe it's about a little less than 2% of the attorney population are veterans, which ends up being 30-some thousand attorneys. And so the idea was, let's connect with as many of them as we can get into our group and bring them in. And so we're getting close to 1,000. We're growing quickly. So I encourage folks to join that group, and, we can help connect you to wherever it is in the country that you're going to try to get you help.
And where can we find your podcast?
Yeah, Apple and all of them basically, right? So like, luckily we got a great business development manager here, Mike Burney, who, helps run the podcast, and he puts it in, I believe it's called Buzzsprout, and it gets sent out to all these different podcasts. So I suspect any format that folks are out there listening to, our show's getting sent out there.
I feel the same way. I'm like, where is it? It's everywhere. It's, Apple, Spotify. I don't know where. Thankfully, we have you have your guy. I've got Peyton White over there listening in to make sure I don't say anything wrong or to make sure that it gets out there. But yeah, that's perfect. So I would encourage everyone, listen in, take the time to see what opportunities are out there when it comes to podcasts, learning experiences. I'd say for anyone in the audience, my website, mwl-law.com, also has a number of webinars. So if you are looking to get into the space, you just want to learn more about insurance in general, because maybe you're not sure. I'd encourage you, check it out, go around. It's a great opportunity, and reach out. If anyone here on the Military Veterans and Law podcast are interested in just learning more about insurance, I am happy to take every one of your calls. If you're looking for a new career change, I'm also happy to talk to you there. We're always looking for good talent. But yeah, Jerrod, that's all that's what I've got for you. Do you have any other questions or any other comments you want to talk on?
No, I just want to thank you and MWL for the service that you're doing for everybody. There's so many webinars on your all's website, and of course, all the different graphs that are such a great resource. And, like when I'm out and about driving around South Carolina to attend different hearings, inspections, meetings with experts and so forth, I listen to that in the car, and, it's just such a great resource, and I appreciate it.
And now that we're working together more, you don't even have to listen to the podcast, hear my voice. You can just call me. I'll talk to you when on your way to an inspection. I'm good with it.
Nice. I appreciate it.
Well, no, that's all I got. So I appreciate you. All audience members, listen in. Again, that's the Military Veterans and Law podcast. It's great. We appreciate you, Jerrod. Thank you for joining. Appreciate the audience of both podcasts. Until next time, this is Ashton Kirsch, your host with the Subrogation Support Network podcast, and Jerrod with the Military Veterans and Law podcast coming together for this collaboration.